Welcome back to the Life on the Wrist channel. Hope you all are doing alright today. We're going to be covering a very beautiful LeCoultre automatic reference 8986 from 1957. These pieces are always really exciting to cover on the channel because I think they're an incredible mixture of really important watchmaking, which this piece definitely has and we'll get to later in the video, but it also has a really beautiful history to it, and piecing that together along with the historically significant part of watchmaking is, I think, what makes vintage watches so special, and it's always a pleasure and really an honor to cover these types of pieces on the channel. So as always, I will give you a history of LeCoultre, the historical nature of this piece. I'll give you some details about the watch and obviously allow you to see the watch running and see it on the wrist. So we might as well flip perspectives right now so we can jump into this really beautiful reference 8986. Jaeger LeCoultre is a brand that we have covered at length at Life on the Wrist. Mainly, the brand was so influential in watches that they produced, the movements they made, and the impact they had on the watch industry. The well-known, perhaps overused cliché of JLC being the watchmaker's watchmaker holds true in so many ways with this reference 8986. It's an interesting offshoot of a complication that JLC introduced and then expanded on heavily throughout their history. I'm going to wind the watch and I can kind of show you what the complication is. So as I wind this piece, what you'll see is that power reserve indicator slowly but surely charging up. So to truly understand the reference 8986, it's actually best to start with the movement inside of it. This reference houses the caliber 481 movement, a historically significant movement in watchmaking. The movement was introduced in 1948, and it was based on the JLC's caliber 476, which was the very first automatic movement from the brand. The movement used a bumper winding mechanism, which has this rotor that bounces between springs at a 270 degree axis of the movement. The caliber 476 was introduced in 1946, so 2 years before the introduction of the 481, which is running in this movement in this watch. It wasn't the first automatic movement introduced in the world, though. Blancpain had already introduced an automatic movement 20 years before the release of the caliber 476. Rolex had also introduced the Rolex Perpetual 15 years prior to 1946, so JLC was really playing catch-up in some ways with this movement. Going forward 2 years, the brand introduced the caliber 481 movement, which is the movement we're speaking about today. The caliber, unlike the caliber 476, was a historic release for all watch brands, though. The caliber featured a power reserve indicator, which you can see at 12 o'clock. We have done an article on how the complication works, so be sure to check that out. There'll be a link in the description of this video for you to see that. The movement was first put into the JLC Power Wind, the reference E163, and was officially the first production watch from any company to feature a power reserve indicator on the dial. Take that, Blancpain Rolex, am I right? The movement allows the watch to have a power reserve disc that is located at 12 o'clock, which you see on the dial of this watch. On the reference 8986, it displays the 40 hours of power reserve and has a red zone, which will tell the wearer when the watch is low on power, which can be quite useful. The power reserve indicator has became a signature for Jaeger LeCoultre, who expanded this line of watches into lines like the Powermatic, Futurematic, and Réservé de Marche. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of history on the movement that's actually running in this piece. And I think with that, we can move on to looking at the reference, this actual watch. So the reference 8986 has a 35 millimeter 10 karat gold filled case. It features an extremely beautiful, and I'll kind of focus on the lugs here. It features extremely beautiful concave fluted lugs that attach to the case extremely elegantly. The concave sections of the lugs, which you can see, really give it a different look than a typical watch, and I think that's an attractive quality of this piece, given that Jaeger LeCoultre produced so many pieces that featured this this complication. The dial has faded from what was likely white or a cream color when it was originally produced in 1957 to a darker golden cream color, which, as you can see, does have some patina spots on the watch. If you grab the loop that you have to take a look at the movements of some of these pieces, one can see the inscription VXN on the balance cock of this specific movement. This indicates that the movement of the watch was imported to the USA market. For those of you who don't know, to avoid high import taxes and duties on watches, Swiss brands for a period of time imported just the movements of watches to the USA. LeCoultre's brand was actually managed by the Longines Wittnauer Group in the USA, and VXN was the import code used on LeCoultre movements that were imported by this group. There is a common misconception that VXN meant that Vacheron Constantin imported the movement, because Vacheron Constantin at the time also used the same import code to import their movements to the USA market. But what this really means is that the US importing company that I mentioned previously used this stamp for both companies. And so it really is just an indication that that the movement of this watch was imported to the US market. And so the watch was obviously sold in that same market. Now, there are no stamps on no stamps visible on the case back except for this 10 karat gold filled apex with who produced the case. That's something that as a collector you can obviously kind of tie to these pieces, because what happened is the movements of these pieces would be imported to the US market and then married with a case that was oftentimes manufactured in the USA as well. Longines did this pretty heavily through the Longines Wittnauer Group, but as I mentioned, there are no stamps visible with who produced the case of this watch, so it's unclear if the case of this watch was produced in Switzerland or the USA. Now, not only is this reference and the movement of this watch historically significant, but there is also a caseback engraving that I think tells a really nice story for this piece. So if you look at the gold-filled caseback, it has an engraving dedication that says, "To Skip, BS in EE, 52657, OSU, Mom, Dad, Pete, Larry, Mike." The inscription likely points to the sale and the gifting of this watch to Skip from his family in 1957 upon graduation from Ohio State University with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. Now, it can be said with certainty, but with almost certainty, that Skip definitely was a graduate in 1957 from a bachelor's of science degree in electrical engineering, given the engraving and sort of teasing out what that actually means. The engraving basically says it pretty plainly. However, there's an abundance of schools that use the acronym OSU to indicate their university. Ohio State University, Oregon State University, Oklahoma State University, to name a few, and those are only in the USA where this watch was sourced, but tying together some of the other pieces that we've mentioned, it's likely that this was in the USA. Again, based on where this watch was sourced, it is more likely that it hails from a graduation celebration from Ohio State University. We did a little bit of research on the 1957 graduation from Ohio State University. We found that there were 17,256 students that were enrolled in the undergraduate programs that year in 1957, but unfortunately graduation records available to the public from OSU only date back to 1968, so we couldn't find anything out about Skip, the individual who actually received this watch. But if you want to maybe put on your storytelling hat a little bit, it looks like Skip had a beautifully large family. He was one of four men in this family, and he was gifted this incredible watch that likely took him through his career at hopefully an electrical engineering job, where he got to leverage his skills that he learned during his time at school. It is also quite incredible to think about the size of the graduating class, or size of the enrolled class in 1957 at this university. OSU is a very, very large university, and I'm pretty sure they have well over 50,000 students today, and so 17,000 feels small, but I can guarantee that that probably felt quite large when he was attending the school. I'll quickly show you what this watch looks like on the wrist. As I mentioned, I think the lugs of this watch really give it quite a cool look to it. Something a little bit different for a 35mm case. Fits quite nicely. The lugs are fairly long. They're not super concave. It's kind of a very average sort of angle that they sit on, but I think the concave fluted aspect to them give it a really nice look. Gifting watches for a special occasion is a tradition that is still sort of used today. Watches are often gifted as birthday gifts, or like Skip, as a gift for graduation, or to mark a milestone in someone's life. They're objects that can feel like one is moving on to a next phase in their life, and can also mark accomplishments of a life well lived. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this reference 8986 watch that's running on the caliber 481 movement, which was a historically significant movement in the history of watchmaking, being that it was the first serially produced caliber that was used to indicate the power reserve of a watch. No other brand had done this before, and so of course this watch means a lot because it does have that history of that specific movement. Obviously the 8986 was not the first reference that they produced. That was the power wind, but regardless, I think the movement itself in this is historically significant, and I mean, what a beautiful story about getting this watch as a graduation gift. I'm sure that it took Skip through his career, and is a wonderful story to sort of have go along with this watch and really tell the life of what this watch has lived. As always, we will have an article on lifeonthewrist.com where we go in depth on this piece, so be sure to go to Life on the Wrist if you are interested in seeing and reading that article. There are also going to be some more pictures of the watch over there if you want to check that out. We also mentioned a few pieces of information, like our article about the power reserve indicator, complication, and how it works. There will be a link in the description of this video, but also at our article, and some information about the 1957 OSU class is also there, so if you want to check that out, you can head over there. There'll be links in the show notes to all of our social media accounts. Be sure to head over there, and if you wouldn't mind doing all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, it really does help me out. I'd love to know if you have if you find the power reserve indicator a useful complication. I think in manual wind movements it probably feels quite useful. For automatics, it's a little bit of an interesting complication, because being that it's perpetually being wound, maybe it isn't as useful, but I still think it's a beautiful complication. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on the movement, and if you have a power reserve indicator watch. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and share this video with a friend who might be interested in watches. With that said, thank you so much again for watching this video, and stay tuned for our next video. I think you can, with deductive reasoning, from one of our previous videos, you can probably figure out which watch we're going to be covering, so stay tuned for that next week. So with that said, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and until next time.